It helps if I unmute myself. Hi, everybody. You think we've been doing this long enough that I'd remember to unmute my mic. Maybe not. All right, welcome everyone. All right, looks like everybody's connected to audio, so I'll go ahead and get started. This one actually might be a little bit shorter than the ones we normally have, because there is quite a bit to cover, but not nearly as much as say like last month when we were talking about student loan repayment. So we'll go ahead and get started, and if it ends up being a little bit less than we thought it was going to be, and with this hour, then we'll give you a little bit of your lunch hour back. So for those of you who are new here and have not attended one of these before, my name is Sarah Lorenzen, and I am an outreach specialist and a certified financial education instructor. I work with the Oklahoma State Regents for higher education, and the Regents has two outreach initiatives that I support, one called Oklahoma Money Matters and the other called Ready, Set, Repay. And that's a whole lot of words to basically say what I do is I travel around the state and I talk to college students, businesses, nonprofits about money, budgeting, credit, your student loans, all of that good stuff. So I am really happy to be here today. This Make It Count webinar is a webinar we started during COVID that we've been doing on the third Tuesday of every month on a different financial topic. And it has definitely gained in popularity. So we decided to keep it around after the pandemic. I'm so glad to have you guys here today. I'll just kind of go over some norms because I do see some new folks that have not joined us before. If you're comfortable, I'd love for you to keep your camera on. I'm used to being in the classroom, so I definitely love having people that I can see their faces. If you're not comfortable or you're not in a place where you can do that, totally fine. But I definitely always ask because I enjoy being able to see your faces. I am going to ask for you to stay muted, not because I don't want you to participate. I definitely want you to utilize that chat function, but because this is being recorded. So folks who either want to see this again or who missed it and want to check it out on our YouTube channel later, will be able to check it out. So we just want to make sure you're muted. That way we have as little background noise as possible. I got a dog downstairs who may randomly bark at my neighbors, but I'll do my best to try to keep him quiet too. But as I said, I want you to be interactive. I already had several of you in the chat say hi. Hey, y'all, I'm glad that you're here too. I definitely want you to use that chat function if you have comments, concerns, questions. I've got a couple places where I'll stop for questions, but if you have one pop in your head, pop it in the chat and I will make sure to come back and answer those questions. As with any financial topic, you'll also hear me say that we're going to be respectful of others' thoughts and opinions. When it comes to anything money, it doesn't matter what it is, student loans, budgeting, even negotiating a salary for a job, people have their own opinions and it can be a little bit of a hot button topic sometimes. So we just want to put that out there that this is a safe space. This is, for educational purposes, we're kind of all here to help each other. So that said, also, if you guys have some advice for your fellow attendees, you're welcome to put that in the chat as well. So what we're going to talk about today, we're talking about evaluating job offers. This is really big, especially if you just graduated, but really at any point. Our economy has been really weird the last couple of years. So you've got people who have been laid off, who are looking for other jobs. You have people who have decided, maybe they want to work remotely. They don't want to work in an office anymore. So they're looking for new jobs. So this is an important topic all the way around to know what you're looking for, because not all job offers are the same. One may offer you more money, but the benefits are not what they should be. And so you're ending up basically about the same financially because you'll end up having to pay more stuff out of pocket. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what to look for. We're going to talk about kind of some tips on how to evaluate what is right for you. And then I'm going to give you a few tips about negotiating job offers. So let's get started. If you've been here before, I do a poll every time. And the reason being is because there are a lot of you from different backgrounds. And so we always want to know who we have on the call. Do I have students? Do I have staff? Do I have counselors? because that way I can make sure that you have the information that you need, either if you are, college or high school staff, to help your students. And if you're a student, then I'm making sure that you have the information that you need. So it looks like everybody answered really, really super fast. So thank you for that. Looks like we've got a really good mix of college students and college staff. So that is awesome. I am so glad that y'all are here. So let's get started. Yay, you got offered the job. That's awesome. Congratulations. Now, how do you go about picking which one works best for you, right? Well, that actually starts before you get the job offer. And I know some people go, what? I have to start thinking about the job before the job offer? Well, yes, because you need to know what your deal breakers are, what things you absolutely need to have before you even start looking for a job. Because yes, we all need a paycheck. And we've all been there where sometimes we just need to make sure we have money. So we just take a job to make sure that we can pay our bills. But when you are searching for that career job, you're searching for that thing you want to do, you want to make sure that you are getting the most out of it and that you're offering your skills to a company. So this whole process, especially the negotiation piece at the end, you need to know what you realistically can expect to get paid for this role. You need to know your cost of living expenses, what you actually need to make in order to survive. As well as your personal values. If you are one of those people that does value the flexibility of being able to work from home, or if you are one of those people who maybe has ADHD and working at home is not a good fit, you need to understand that, because if you are the person who can't work from home and you accept 100% work from home job, you may be setting yourself up for failure. And if not failure, at least not enjoying your work, because you're going to struggle. Whereas, you may work in a hybrid environment, you enjoy being able to go into the office and work with your coworkers. You may also need to have insurance. It may be important for you to have some sort of retirement plan. So it is important to make sure that you're thinking about that before you even start applying for jobs. So when you're looking through those job descriptions, you're applying for jobs that meet your values as well as just your skills. How do you do that? Well, do your research. Depending on what field you go in, what you start at, the very first, you just graduated from college, salary you're going to get is very different than the salary you can expect to make 10 years down the line. I'll give you a personal example here. So my undergraduate degree is in communications, and my cousin and I have the same exact degree, right? She's a couple years older than me, but she's always sort of been my mentor when it comes to career things. She lives in Maryland, Baltimore County to be exact. So Baltimore County cost of living is much higher than it is here in Oklahoma. The job market looks very different there than it does here. When she graduated from college, she started making $45,000, $50,000 a year right out of the gate. Well, here in Oklahoma, the starting salary back when I first graduated for someone with a communications degree was less than $30,000 a year. I didn't know that going in. And that even affected my student loan borrowing, how much I took out, because I took out more than I probably should have, considering that I was going to be making $30,000 a year for the first few years of my career. So do your research. It's easier now than it's ever been to find out what those things are. You can go to websites like payscale.com, glassdoor.com, salary.com. Even some of our local sites, you can go to the Oklahoma Workforce's website and look up starting salaries for certain positions. Also, okcollegestart.com. I don't have that in there, but that is actually one of my sister initiatives here at the Regents. And they have all kinds of careers with salary ranges and what those jobs look like to help you decide what you're wanting to do and kind of where you're wanting to take your degree. So look at those, because you want to know that you're making a realistic choice. right? If you're probably not, no matter what you're doing. And it depends. There's some jobs where you graduate, you may start at 45, 50,000 or more, depending on the position. But there's some jobs where you're just not, like, that is not what that type of position is going to pay. And so if you need to make sure you're being realistic when you are asking for a certain price point in your job. Now, that's not saying that you shouldn't ask for what you're worth. But that is to say that make sure that you are balancing what you're worth with what you can realistically ask for. So you're setting yourself up for success. Also, consider your future salary too. Does this company offer cost of living increases regularly? What is your advancement opportunities within a certain company? Do you want to be a director of something someday? Then it may be worth taking a lower paying job in the beginning to get your foot in the door with the company if there is a lot of room for growth. If there's not, then you may take it for the experience, but continue looking for other opportunities that give you that growth. And definitely make sure that you evaluate your personal values, especially if you have children, or you're wanting to have children at some point. You're going to want to consider, is this job something that is family friendly? Meaning, if I need to leave at 4:30 to make sure I can go pick my kid up at daycare, is that going to be okay with this company? Most companies nowadays are a lot better and a lot more flexible when it comes to this, but not all of them. And so it is very important to do your research on companies you're applying for, as well as what you can reasonably expect to get. Another thing to think about is, are there benefits to this job beyond the salary that make it worth it, right? When you're looking at a salary package, what it's going to show you is it's going to show you your actual gross salary. It's going to show you the benefits that are included. And you want to really look at that. Like, for example, right, at the Regents, we get paid well. But the thing that's really the sweet of the deal of working for the Regents is our benefits. We get wonderful benefits. So while maybe you could go and work for a private company that maybe pays a little bit better, are their benefits as good? Could you deal with a little bit less money month to month and get these great benefits that come with it? And that's a thing that you need to weigh out when you are looking, because just because someone gives you a super high salary does not necessarily mean that the benefits are going to match up. Because I've worked for companies who have not the greatest benefits, but they pay really well. But then it works out that I'm having to pay for those benefits out of my own paycheck. So it ends up basically coming out in the wash that I could have made a little bit less money if I had a job that paid me in benefits of retirement or tuition assistance to help with maybe a graduate degree, or a really good insurance, or any of those things. So it's important to look at all of the things that are in that offer package. How much leave do you get? Sometimes the flexibility of having a lot of vacation time that you can have a really good work-life balance is worth it to maybe take a little bit less money on your paycheck. Same thing with insurance. What does that deductible look like for you? Is it a high deductible plan? Are you going to, maybe they cover your premiums, but if something happens and you end up in the hospital, you're on the hook for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 grand. That's going to end up taking out of your paycheck. So them taking care of your premiums may not work out as well. Do they offer things like stocks? If you plan on going to grad school, do they do any kind of tuition reimbursement? If you have student loans, do they do any kind of student loan reimbursement, where they will pay for a portion of your loans. A lot of employers are doing that nowadays as an incentive to get people to come work for them. If you are a person that is pursuing something like public service loan forgiveness, is that employer someone who would qualify? Are they a nonprofit or a government entity? What other incentives do they offer? Sometimes, you get really cool things. Do they offer professional development to where maybe you will say start at a bank as a teller, or you start as maybe a customer service representative for a company, but they will pay for you to get certifications or to get more education that in the long run are going to make you more money. So maybe you can sacrifice the super high salary in the beginning in order to help get that foundation under you where you can make more money later. Do they offer things like a pension? Do they offer things like profit sharing? Do they give you a company car, a cell phone, or a computer? Do they have any other benefits? Maybe they help pay for gym memberships, or they help with a stipend for daycare. I've heard of some companies that even have daycares on staff that, that you can take your kid to work with you and drop your kid off at the daycare. And it gives you the flexibility of being there if your kid needs something, but still being able to do your job. Do they offer things like travel cost reimbursement? Do they offer sabbaticals if you need them for some reason? All things to consider when you're looking for a job. All right. The next thing you want to look at, and this is pretty, I wouldn't say pretty serious, but definitely something that you want to consider, is in this day and age, the reality is sometimes layoffs happen. I myself have been laid off twice in my career through no fault of my own. It just happened to be budget shortfalls, and I was the person that got the short end of the stick, along with a few others. It's nothing to do with the company. It happens. However, and while you can't completely stop it from happening, you can do your research and do the best you can to try to make sure that you are going to work for a healthy company to minimize the chance of you ending up in that situation. So if you're applying to a company, if you're, interviewing and you're really interested, consider researching that company. Not just for the interview of being able to, speak to the business or the culture or anything like that during your interview. During that research, consider looking them up on the Better Business Bureau, just Googling the company and seeing what comes up, checking out Facebook reviews, looking at sites like Glassdoor. I know I already mentioned that once, but one of the great things about Glassdoor is current and former employees can actually go and rate and review companies. And so you get a real picture into the culture of the company, but also research their financial records, right? Especially if you're going to a corporation, if you've been paying attention to the news just the last couple of years, tech has done a huge layoff. Even for some fairly healthy companies, they've had to do layoffs. So look at their financials. How is the company doing? Does it look like maybe they're doing shady stuff? If you check the SEC, have they been under investigation? Are there things that you need to be aware of before accepting a position? Because while, the advice is, make sure you have 3 to 6 months worth of savings, that if something happens, which is definitely good advice, you can't always predict if something's going to happen, but you can stack the odds in your favor. So make sure that you are researching these companies. Okay. Another thing you want to take into account is, what's your commute going to look like? It might be better for you to take a position that is very close, even if maybe it pays you a little bit less salary, because you're going to save a tremendous amount of money in gas and maintenance on your car, than taking a job that maybe pays you more, but you're driving an hour and a half one way every day to get to that job. So you really need to evaluate what works. Sometimes it's not even just the cost of transportation when you're considering your commute. Sometimes it might just be the mental stress of having to deal with traffic. Is that something that is going to limit your quality of life? Is it going to take an extra, 3 hours out of your day? When before my mom retired, she was working for the Air Force, but they lived 45 minutes away from base. So it is very important to make sure that you're thinking about things like that, because she would constantly complain about how early she had to get up in the morning and having to deal with other drivers and having to deal with traffic, and especially as she was getting older, that was just not something that was good for her, and it really affected her mental health as well as her work-life balance. So that's something to take into account when you're looking at those job things. And I do see that y'all have popped some questions in the chat, but I'm gonna move on past and I will come back to those. So I have not forgotten you. I will get to those questions. Okay. Also, maybe the job requires you to move. Maybe you got a job out of state, or maybe you got a job in a different part of the state. Maybe you're from Tulsa and the job's in Oklahoma City, or vice versa. You need to consider that the cost of living may be different. The cost of living in Oklahoma City and Tulsa is different from the cost of living in, say, Lawton, or down in Durant. They're, depending on the part of the state you're in, or if you're moving out of state, the cost in Dallas is a lot more than the cost in Oklahoma City. The cost in New York City is a lot higher than in Oklahoma City. So if you are going to get a position, make sure that you are looking at the different cost of livings. Sites like Glassdoor, which I already mentioned, salary.com, NerdWallet also has a cost of living calculator that you can go and look at what you're currently making, or even if you go and research, say, like average first year salary for this position, what you would make in Oklahoma versus what you would need to make. That way, whenever you are interviewing for those jobs, you can make sure that you are educated in how much it's going to actually cost you to live. Even when, we talk about New York, I'm from Southern New York State, and even going New York City versus my hometown, which is about 60 miles north of the city, the cost of living is very different, and even further north, when you're into sort of the more rural parts of the state, the cost of living is different there too. Even you cross into New Jersey, the cost of living is different. So it's really important to make sure that you're taking that to account, because you could be like, oh, I got a great paying job that pays $75,000 a year and I just graduated. But with cost of living, you may actually need to make 110 to be able to make a living. And you need to know that going in, because you don't want to accept a position, move, and then go, oh, now I have to have this job and 2 others to make sure that I make ends meet. Make sure you're researching your tax rates in different states. And this is your property tax, your sales tax, your income tax, because depending on the state, it can vary widely. Oklahoma versus Texas. Texas doesn't have income tax. Oklahoma does. But if you look at the property taxes in Texas, they're actually a lot higher than the property taxes here. I have a friend who actually moved here. She made a lateral move. She works for the federal government. She was living in Nevada and she moved here to Oklahoma. And she'll tell you that when she actually started getting her paychecks were actually less when she got here to Oklahoma because of the tax structure in Nevada. So it's important to take those things into consideration, regardless of where you're wanting to go, even if you're moving from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, because the local taxes may be different. You can calculate your net pay. I've actually got this link that is on here on the end of the slides, so you can get a hold of it. But I love this ADP resource where you can calculate your paycheck. So you can take your salary, say they offered me a salary of $45,000 a year. You can go in and it will estimate your federal taxes. You can put in the state and the city that you're living in, and it will help estimate those taxes. And so you can actually see realistically what you would be bringing home and make sure that there aren't any surprises there. So do a lot of research. Also, if you are moving for a job, will they help with your moving expenses? I don't know the last time you guys tried to move, but moves, especially interstate moves, can be quite expensive. You know, back in the early 2000s when my family moved down here from New York, we did most of it ourselves. You know, we drove the truck down ourselves. I think the most expensive thing was me and my stepbrother and my mom flew down here when we initially moved. But, you know, my stepdad and his dad drove a truck with all of our stuff. We rented that vehicle, getting everything set up, any kind of deposits or down payments if you're buying a house, things of that nature, they all add up. So are they going to be able to help you with those expenses? Because if not, or if the salary is not high enough that you can recoup some of those expenses, it may not be worth taking that position, even if it is in a location that you may want to go live. So those are some really important things to take in mind when you are looking about those jobs. This is another thing. You want to try to consider who your boss is. There are statistics that will tell you that most people, when they leave a position, it's not because they don't like the company. It's not because they don't get good benefits, because they can't stand their boss, or it's a toxic work environment. And so it's very important. And you can do research on things like Glassdoor, like we discussed, but also just the vibe you get from the interview. If maybe you feel like you just really didn't jive with the manager during the interview, that might be a red flag. You know, if you notice that, you know, the folks that you're dealing with in the interview aren't, you know, shiny, happy people, that may be an issue. You know, consider when you're interviewing, you know, in every interview, they generally give you a, hey, do you have any questions for me? Consider looking up some questions that will allow you to ask questions of your boss. Like, what is your management style? In this position, what does success look like? This will help you gauge a little bit of company culture. You know, I once interviewed for a remote position, and one of the questions I asked the hiring manager was, you know, establishing company culture remotely is really hard. How do you guys do that? That gives you, not only does it show them that you're interested in the position enough to really want to get into the nitty-gritty of, are you a good fit for the position? It also helps make sure that you can pick up on red flags, because if they stumble over the question, or if they say something about, oh, well, you know, we don't really do this, or, you know, whatever, it may help you sort of get a vibe of what is good and what is not. Okay, and I already kind of touched on this, but also the company culture. You want to know what the company is like. You know, I've worked for companies where they definitely tried to make it, you know, happy and rewarding and fun, but on a corporate level, it was very structured, and there was very, very hard targets to hit for success, and it caused a lot of stress. So even though, you know, we're having a great time, like they're going to do a pizza party, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it still was very stressful most of the time. And so even though that particular job actually paid fairly well, I ended up leaving that job and taking a pay cut because I needed to get that stress out of my life. So that's something to think of also. You know, there's also lots of, you know, mean girls are a thing, even after you've graduated from high school. You know, do you get that vibe that there may be people who you don't trust in positions of power? You might consider that. You know, talk to the people, do your research online. It is, as I mentioned earlier, so easy now to get in and look at companies. And yes, you're going to get those people that are just disgruntled. They got fired because they did something wrong and they left a nasty review online. But a lot of those are easy to spot because you can tell it's not necessarily about the company itself. It is about their manager or it's about something else. But you can go in and you can look at those things and you can get a real feel for, is this going to be a good fit or not? Also, something to look at is, what can I learn in this position, right? When I first graduated from college, I thought that, my career was going to be a ladder, right? Like they joke, the corporate ladder. I thought it was going to be straight up. I would entry level and I would grow up into the position. But truth be told, my career is more sort of gone like this. And, sometimes it just goes straight across, and that's okay, as long as you are working towards the skills that you need to have to get to where you want to go eventually. So ask yourself these questions. Does this job move my career forward? Even if it maybe is a step back or a step to the side versus a step up. Are you going to learn more marketable skills that will help you get a better job later? That may be worth doing a year or two at a company that maybe isn't your ideal company, but it'll give you the skills that you need to get a better job in a couple of years. Are they going to teach you critical skills that you need to learn? I back when I was in my 20s, I had gotten laid off from a job, just kind of needed a paycheck. So I started working at a call center, and it definitely wasn't my favorite gig. I really did not like it, but I was there for 5 years. And in that time, I was able to get training to be management. I went from being on the floor to being a manager. Well, what did that do? That gave me management skills. It gave me supervisory skills. It gave me negotiation skills. It gave me all sorts of skills that I use daily now to be able to, come talk to students, or being able to, reach out to people in power at universities and talk to them about the financial wellness on their campus. So that move may have not been my favorite at the time, but I was able to get a lot out of it, more than the money that I made while I was working there. So take that into account as well, because sometimes a lateral move can do as much for your career as, jumping from a, specialist to a director or whatever. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some tips for negotiating. Okay, do be likable, right? I know that sounds weird, but make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Don't be a negative Nancy. Don't, smack talk the fact that they gave you maybe a lower offer than you wanted. You could say something like, that's wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to working for your company, but I wanted to discuss with you if there's any room for negotiation on the salary, because it's a little bit lower than what I need. Also think about what you want out of that job and be selective about what you push back on. Maybe your insurance isn't that great right now, but the advancement opportunities that get you the skills you need to get a better job later are great. That might be worth doing a couple of years with maybe not the best insurance plan, or maybe with a job that pays a little bit less, to make sure that you get those skills so you're more marketable later on. Help them understand why you deserve what it is that you've asked for. Become really, really well-versed in what your skills are and what you bring to the company that no one else can. That may, in my case, it may be, well, what I bring is a wide amount of experience from all different sectors. And that helps me to be able to speak the language of people, all the way from your entry-level folks all the way up to your C-suite officers. That's something that I bring to the table. And you have those things too. You may need to just take a little bit of time to evaluate what those things are, so you can speak confidently about what those things are that you bring to the table, and why it is worth them investing in you. All right. Also understand their constraints. They have budgets, especially if you are looking at things like nonprofit or government. They can only wiggle so much. And yes, for the right candidate, a lot of positions might be able to wiggle a little bit on their salary range. But be realistic in what you're asking for. You know, if their salary range is $30,000 to $45,000 and you're asking for $60,000, they're probably going to laugh in your face. Maybe not literally, but they're going to not be able to take that. And consider the entire deal. We've kind of talked about this all the way along. Are there benefits that will help you later on, or will, maybe the day-to-day pay isn't as high as you would like, but it's enough to make sure that you can pay your bills. But there's great benefits. Maybe they offer retirement or a pension, which is kind of rare right now for anybody who offers a pension at this point. Maybe they pay for your life insurance. Maybe they don't make you pay for your premiums for your health insurance. Maybe they cover all of that. Maybe just the insurance is really good, even if you have to pay for that. So consider the entire deal before you start pushing back, because maybe you could realistically deal with a little bit lower salary for better insurance, or you could deal with maybe not as great of a retirement package and just do some retirement planning on your own if the pay is enough, if your insurance is enough, if they're taking care of that, so you can take the money you would be spending on insurance and put it towards your retirement in an IRA or something else separate from the company. So consider those things. Let's talk about some things you should not do. Don't negotiate just for the sake of negotiating. If they actually give you an offer that you think is reasonable, just accept it. You don't have to negotiate. Now, can you? Should you, if you feel like you need to? Yes. But don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Don't be critical or suspicious when questioning something about the offer. Don't immediately go in there thinking that they are trying to, pull one over on you, because most of the time they're not. Not saying there aren't companies out there that do shady things. Yeah, I mean, you can watch the news and know that sometimes that happens, but make sure that you aren't being overly critical. Make sure you are giving them the benefit of the doubt, because it is just a company that's trying to make money. Don't ignore red flags. As I mentioned earlier, if you got a really weird vibe from the hiring manager, don't just overlook that, because you're going to end up later probably being pretty unhappy with your job. Or if maybe they said something and it sounded pretty shady and unethical in the interview, and you're like, I don't know about that. I wouldn't do that. I actually have a friend of mine who just quit a job because she had her higher up manager ask her to do some pretty unethical things. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then she ended up having to leave her job. So make sure you're listening to your gut here, because there are some times when you just know that it's going to be a good fit, and a lot of times when it's not going to. So make sure that you're listening to yourself. And as I mentioned before, do your due diligence. We are in the world of the internet. There is so much that you can do research on to find out the company's financial health, find out about the company culture. And is it 100%? No, because unless you get in the situation, you're never going to know 100% for sure. But you can definitely arm yourself with a lot more information to make sure that you are as prepared as possible. And don't be afraid to say no if the job doesn't work for you. Trust me, I understand that sometimes you just need to make sure that you and your children have food in your mouth and a roof over your head. And sometimes you have to take those positions. But you can also wait out the right job. You can maybe take that job temporarily and find something else if you have to, but don't be afraid to say no. Because if you're going to be miserable in that position, or you're not going to fit in with the company culture, or something of that nature, you're going to end up having to look for a new job anyway. Right? Like, yeah, you might get a few weeks of a paycheck, but if it's not a good fit, you and them are probably going to be miserable. So consider that before negotiating, because sometimes it may not even be worth negotiating. Or if you've been negotiating and they're just really not meeting, even trying to meet you a quarter of the way, then that may not be the position for you. All right, here's some resources for you that can help. There's, of course, our website, oklahomamoneymatters.org. There is that ADP site where you can calculate your net pay. I actually heard about that on a webinar from my friends at Penn State. They have a huge financial wellness program there, and they have a ton of really good resources. And this is one that they came across, and I have used it in every presentation I've done since then about this topic, because this is so helpful, because it may not be exactly like what your paycheck's going to look like, but it definitely helps you estimate to make it feel a little bit better. Salary.com, Glassdoor, the NerdWallet's cost of living calculator, and PayScale. Those are all super helpful in what salary should I be making in a certain area? What does the company culture look like? If I'm moving to a new area, is this offer that they made me feasible for me to continue having the same standard of living that I have currently, or maybe improve or have a more comfortable standard of living? You can also go look up the financials of these companies on things like Google Finance or Yahoo Finance. You look up Bloomberg, you can look at the Security and Exchange Commission and check out the health of some of those companies. That is all public record. You can go and look it up very, very easily. All right, that being said, I am going to stop the recording because I want to be able to answer all of these questions that you guys have asked. So if for some reason I don't get to a question of yours, or you have additional questions later, I've put my contact information up on the screen. You are welcome to send me an email. I am not a financial counselor, so I cannot give you super personalized advice, but if you have a question about needing more information, I am happy to point you to resources that can help you. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.